Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We are on Canto 1. Chapter 1, verse number 17, I think. Yes?
That's correct.
Correct. Correct.
Yep.
Correct. I love that. Correct. When I was at first in India, people used to say that all the time, but they used to say it so quickly. I thought they were saying correct, but they were saying correct. And I was saying, somebody would say something and somebody else would go correct, correct. And I think they're saying crack. I think, is this some kind of Indian kind of way of saying like cool or something like that? That's cool. They were saying correct, correct, you are correct. And it was like the beautiful thing I find about Indian English is that it still retains kind of sayings and formalities of grammar that are from a different era, from a previous era, from like 19th century or early 20th century. And it's very, very appealing, very appealing.
See, the Britishers have taught English to all of us.
Yeah. But English is, language changes so much, but it's like, but Indian people have a way of, doing things the same. They don't, if it's like, at some time, I think it was in the 80s or somewhere, as the Namhata program that Jai Pataka Maharaj just re-established was spreading out over Bengal and into Orissa, they actually came across some groups that had been maintaining the model for Namhata that Bhakti Vinod established over 100 years ago. So that kind of conservatism in Indian culture is actually a very good thing, because in spite of invasions and disruptions over centuries, they were able to maintain their culture. It's a very powerful thing, even though they've had to absorb so many influences. Anyway, let's carry right along here. This is Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 1, verse number 17.
Okay.
Sorry?
Yes.
No. You can't sing. It's only one person singing on. Tasya kaman yudarani parigitani suribihi bruhi na sharadananam lilaya dadata kalaha. Translation: His transcendental acts are magnificent and gracious, and great learned sages like Narad sing of them. Please therefore speak to us who are eager to hear about the adventures he performs in his various incarnations. The personality of Godhead purport. The personality of Godhead is never inactive, as some less intelligent persons think. His works are magnificent and magnanimous. His creations, both material and spiritual, are all wonderful and contain all variegatedness. They are described nicely by such liberated souls as Srila Narad, Vyasa, Valmiki, Devala, Asita, Madhva, Sri Chaitanya, Ramanuja, Vishnu Swami, Nimbarka, Sridhar, Vishwanath, Baladev, Bhakti Vinod, Siddhanta Saraswati, and many other learned and self-realized souls. These creations, both material and spiritual, are full of opulence, beauty, and knowledge. But the spiritual realm is more magnificent due to its being full of knowledge, bliss, and eternity. The material creations are manifested for some time as perverted shadows of the spiritual kingdom and can be likened to cinemas. They attract people of less intelligent caliber who are attracted by false things. Such foolish men have no information of the reality, and they take it for granted that the false material manifestation is the all in all. But more intelligent men, guided by sages like Vyas and Narad, know that the eternal kingdom of God is more delightful, larger, and eternally full of bliss and knowledge. Those who are not conversant with the activities of the Lord and his transcendental realm are sometimes favored by the Lord in his adventures as incarnations, wherein he displays the eternal bliss of his association in the transcendental realm. By such activities, he attracts the conditioned souls of the material world. Some of these conditioned souls are engaged in the false enjoyment of material senses, and others in simply negating their real life in the spiritual world. These less intelligent persons are known as karmis, or fruity workers, and jnanis, or dry mental speculators. But above these two classes of men is the transcendentalist known as sattvata, or the devotee, who is busy neither with rampant material activity nor with the material speculation. He is engaged in the positive service of the Lord, and thereby he derives the highest spiritual benefit unknown to the karmis and jnanis. As the supreme controller of both the material and spiritual worlds, the Lord has different incarnations of unlimited categories. Incarnations like Brahma, Rudra, Manu, Prithu, and Vyas are his material qualitative incarnations, but his incarnations like Rama, Nishringa, Narashringa, Varaha, and Vamana are his transcendental incarnations. Lord Sri Krishna is the fountainhead of all incarnations, and he is therefore the cause of all causes. Tasya karman yudarani parigitani suribihi bruhina sharadananam lilaya dadata kalaha. His transcendental acts are magnanimous and gracious, and great learned sages like Narad sing of them. Please, therefore, speak to us who are eager to hear about the adventures he performs in his various incarnations. Umagyanati mirandasya gyananjana shalakaya chakshurun militam jena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajiva Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Deva Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Visakan Vitangscha. Hey Krishna, Karuna Sindhu, Dina Bandhu, Jagat Pate, Gopesha, Gopika, Kanta, Radha, Kanta, Namostute. Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi, Radhe Vrindavaneshwari, Brisha Bhanu Sute Devi, Pranamami Hari Priye. Vanshakaupatrubhyascha Kripasindo Bhaevacha Patita Nam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Namah Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Name. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschachadesha Tarine. Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Jatkripa Tamaham Vande Sri Gurundina Taranam. So as usual, there's a lot to be dealt with here. His creations are both material and spiritual, and are wonderful, all wonderful, and contain all variegatedness. They are described nicely by such liberated souls as Srila Narada, Vyasa, Valmiki, Devala, Asita, Madhva, Sri Chaitanya, Ramanuja, Vishnu Swami, Nimbarka, Sridhar, Vishwanatha, Baladev, Bhaktivinoda, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, and many other learned and self-realized souls. If you want to learn anything on a high level, on a refined level, you have to actually hear from very qualified people. Like, we all have a basic understanding of mathematics, but we don't, therefore, if we all understand arithmetic. That's about all I remember about mathematics, actually. Algebra and calculus and so on and so forth. I don't really have much recollection of those things because I don't need to use them at any time in my life. But then you can go further with mathematics, right up to the most abstract kind of mathematics. And you see, actually, in regard to that, there's like a pyramid. The broad base is most people have numeracy. They understand numbers and they know that 2 oranges plus 2 oranges makes 4 oranges. But the more elaborate and the more refined the mathematics becomes, fewer and fewer people are familiar with it, and fewer and fewer people can actually explain it, and fewer people can actually understand it. So it's like that in any subject. And then, of course, you get to through tertiary education, you go into postgraduate study and so on. And it becomes a more and more rarefied atmosphere. So here we have a list of great people who are all actually what you could say professors of spiritual science in its highest degree. The highest degree of spiritual science is to understand God as a person, not an imaginary person, but an actual person, a person who exists. And The only way you can actually come to understand any great person is by them revealing themselves. They reveal themselves to you. By definition, something that is greater than us cannot come under our control. And therefore, if we're searching out an understanding of what is the greatest, then that, whatever it may be in the first instance, is something that cannot come under our control. If we were able to control something that is greater than us, then by logical argument, it's not greater than us. We are greater than it. So we have to accept this as a basic principle in life. If you want to know something, if you want to learn about something, first of all, you have to have an interest in learning it. What's the point? I mean, that's just thinking about mathematics. I mean, so many classes we all had to just somehow or another endure through school with no intention, no desire to learn this stuff, but it was forced upon us. So many subjects like that, forced upon us. And we had no interest in learning them. But the first thing about learning anything is you want to learn it. And then you see that. I see, like when I was at university, there were a lot of people, they were called mature students. They were people who'd left school, left high school, or they'd left university and they'd gone out in the world. And then after a few years of working in the world, they had a very clear understanding of what it is they wanted to do. And therefore they knew they had to do some study in order to be qualified for it. And they were the most serious students because they knew exactly why they were there. Whereas there were a lot of undergraduate students who just, they didn't know why they were there. They didn't know what they wanted to do. They would chop and change courses, or then they would just leave. So that principle is very simple. If you want to learn something, then you will seek out somebody who can teach you something about that. It's only logical. And the fact of the matter is, just like we say, I want to understand something. Why do we say understand? I mean, it's the same kind of thing is there. We say people use stand over tactics. Why don't they say overstand tactics? It's just a form of speech. But the literal meaning of understand means to stand under. In other words, you put yourself in a position where you accept you don't want to know, or rather you want to know something because you don't know it. So you need to then find out somebody who is in knowledge of the subject, and you have to satisfy that person that you're a serious student. You have to satisfy that person. You can't just demand something from somebody. You have to have a certain demeanor, a certain approach. And then knowledge is revealed to you. Things are revealed to you that you don't know. And they're revealed to you with reason and argument and with substance. That's substance. That which underpins something. Substantive. It stands under, it's the foundation of something. And without certain givens, you can't do anything. Like with geometry, there are axiomatic principles that are presented to you. It's not like, here's a problem and here's no information. Here's no principles. Solve this geometric problem. But you're not given any givens. You're not given any axioms like, the three angles of a triangle must add up to 360 degrees, and all of these sort of things. And then you're given problems to solve on the basis of axiomatic principles, truths that are considered to be self-evident. You don't have to prove them anymore. You just accept this. This is known. This is a known fact. So when we come to this subject of the supreme absolute truth, the cause of all causes, which is actually the goal of philosophy. The purpose of philosophy is to seek out the absolute truth, the causeless cause of all causes. And in order to actually, as I'm saying, in order to do that, you have to approach someone who is in knowledge of that subject. Now, of course, we don't live in a world where that kind of knowledge is readily available now. Or there's no, like Srila Prabhupada went to Massachusetts, MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. That's a mouthful. Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And he said, he was giving a talk, and he said, where is there in this great institution that department which gives knowledge of the soul? Now, there's a lot in that statement. First of all, it's beginning with the understanding that the soul exists. Not that, we have to find out, is there a soul or is there not a soul? There is a soul. So we begin with the understanding the supreme personality of Godhead, the causeless cause of all causes, is the supreme personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, the absolute truth. That is accepted as a fact from the very beginning. It's not that we have to seek anything out in that regard, or it's not that we can actually, in one sense, prove that. Save and accept by what is revealed to us. Because if we accept this principle that, like I've been saying, that there is a causeless cause of all causes, then that entity, he, she, or it, animal, vegetable, or mineral, that energetic source of everything is incomprehensibly greater than us. Another kind of angle on that was one time somebody said to Srila Prabhupada, nobody knows who God is. If there is a God, nobody knows who it is. And Srila Prabhupada's very simple answer to that, on the basis of the words the person used, nobody knows. He said, how do you know? Have you asked everybody? If you want to make claims like that, you have to be able to verify your claim. And if you say nobody knows who God exists, it means that you have asked every single person in existence, and they've all said to you, I don't know. The fact of the matter is, there are, as it's saying here, many, many, many great professors of this knowledge who know who God is. And they know all about his creations, both material and spiritual, and all the wonders and all the variegatedness of those creations. They know about these things, and they can reveal knowledge to you about that. Unfortunately, in regard to this, the British did a very fine job on what is called the mythologies of ancient cultures, namely all of the Eastern cultures, especially the Indian culture, but also the Middle Eastern cultures and the Greek, Greco, and Roman cultures, all of which had hierarchies of gods who were entities from a higher level of existence than ours, who had influence and control over this level of existence, and who we could never overcome, who are always greater than us. They managed to convince everybody that these entities are fictitious. They don't exist. That all these stories about the gods, the demigods, the supreme personality of Godhead, they managed to just put it all into the mythology basket and make everybody think these are just stories, folk stories, or moral stories. And then it's open to all kinds of speculation about what you can conclude from these things. But they will not accept that there is such a person as Krishna. There is such a person as Rama. There is such a person as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There is such a person as all of these incarnations that are listed here in this Brahma, Rudra, Manu, Prithu, Vyas, as material qualitative incarnations of the Lord, and Raman, Narasringa, Varaha, and Vamana as transcendental incarnations, and that Lord Sri Krishna is the fountainhead of all incarnations, and he is therefore the cause of all causes. This is all just wishful thinking, because there is no Krishna, there are no demigods, none of this exists. There is one God, and he's the father of all of us. And what do we know about him? Well, we have information on the basis of that, well, you can never know him. You can never know. God, the Father of all creatures, you can never know him. That he who sees my face and lives, no one sees my face and lives. I mean, what kind of father is that? You imagine that? You have a mother and father who never reveal themselves to you. It's insane. That's an insane conception. It's pathological, that's violent. I mean, look just at the mundane situation. Your parents, they want you to know them. And they want you to grow up to understand them and love them and be in relationship to them on a personal basis. Whereas this idea that there is some unseen, unknown personality beyond the realm of our conception and perception, who will never be revealed to us, but who, if we do anything wrong, according to the rules and regulations he gives us to live by, then he will send us to hell forever. This is very, very hard to accept. This is all very, very hard to accept, because it just goes against the grain of common sense. So this is a great injustice that has been done, and therefore the real faculty of professors has been tarnished, or the reputation or the identity has been tarnished and disrespected. But these personalities, Narad, Vyas, they are all great professors of the absolute truth, great professors, full of knowledge, full of the most wonderful knowledge, which, and this is the beauty of a personality like Sukadeva Goswami, as we've been reading, the great professors, the very great professors in any subject. I remember, like when I was a kid, there was in black and white TV, there was a really wacky fellow, Professor Julius Sumner Miller, who used to show experiments in physics on television to prove principles. Like, he'd do the thing where how a pendulum swings, that you take it to a certain amplitude, it'll swing to that exact amplitude on the other side, and then it'll go back and it'll swing a little less. And he got a big cannonball on a chain, and he stood there and he had them bring the cannonball up to just in front of his chin and let it go. And he stood there, and it swung out, and it swung back, and it came up, and it just stopped a little bit further away from his chin. But at the point of, and everybody who's watching goes, ah! Things like that, and showing how, once the thing is in motion, it will remain in motion unless something stops it, and so on. All of these principles of physics. He demonstrated all of these things in very simple ways, which anyone could understand. So the most amazing thing about these professors, Narad, let's look at that list again. Oh, come on. What do we got? Srila Narad, Devala, Vyasa, Valmiki, Devala, Asita, Madhva, Sri Chaitanya, Ramanuja, Vishnu Swami, Nimbaka, Sridhar, Vishwanatha, Bhakti Siddhanta, and you can add to that Bhakti Vedanta. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and many other learned and self-realized souls. The greatness of these professors is demonstrated by, let's go back there again and look at verse number 3 of the first chapter, where we have talked about this in quite a bit of detail. But they are able to present Amrita Drava Samyutam. They are able to present nectar, semi-solid and soft, and therefore easily swallowable. Their great ability is that according to time, place, and circumstance, they can present the most difficult and arcane concepts in such a way that even a child can understand. And they come to us in what we could call faculties. Like professors, they work in faculties of universities. So there are 4 main faculties. They are called sampradayas. There's the Vishnu Swami Sampradaya, the Nimbaka Sampradaya, the Ramanuja Sampradaya, and the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya. And these Sampradayas originate from the 4 Kumaras, Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma, and Lakshmi Devi. Originally, these 4, the heads of these faculties, these sampradayas, these universities of absolute knowledge, since time immemorial, these things came into existence in the material world through those personalities, and it's been carried on down generation after generation ever since that time, which is time immemorial. And these are not faculties that depend upon having a physical campus, like, Harvard University or Cambridge University or Oxford University or Stanford University, Cornell, Adelaide University, Melbourne University, so many campuses around the world now where there are faculties of knowledge. This faculty of knowledge, called a sampradaya, is a soft a soft institution. It's not a hard institution. It doesn't need big buildings. It doesn't need money. It doesn't need sponsorship, nothing. You can sit down anywhere under any circumstances and hear knowledge from this faculty, from representatives of this faculty. And it is presented in such a way that anyone can understand it. There is no need for any material prerequisite. As I said earlier, the only requisite is the desire to know. The desire to know. And unfortunately, because of the ever increasingly gross materialism of the age that we live in, questions, real questions that go beyond the animal questions of where's food, where's shelter, where's sex, how do I defend this situation, how do I get sick, get well, all these things that relate to what is basically animal life, they become the predominant questions, and the real questions about, well, where do we all come from, and why are we here, and what is the purpose of life? They get brushed aside. Don't worry about it. Most people now don't really worry about these things. They're too absorbed in getting and spending and trying to enjoy. Working all day, putting something together in a factory so that they can earn money to go down to the shop on the weekend and buy it. Consumerist society, consuming, and the idea, as what did this verse say today about all in all? Where does it say that? Let's go back to that. 117. What did it say there in the purport? Yes. The material creations are manifested for some time as perverted shadows. We'll come back to perverted in a minute, meaning of that. They, as perverted shadows of the spiritual kingdom, and can be likened to cinemas. They attract people of less intelligent caliber who are attracted by false things. Such foolish men have no information of the reality, and they take it for granted that the false material manifestation is the all in all. Right. But then, more intelligent men, guided by sages like Vyas and Narad, know that the eternal kingdom of God is more delightful, larger, and eternally full of bliss and knowledge. They know it. It's not that they have speculated about it. And that's the other point about this. All of these personalities exist and teach in different times, in different places, under different circumstances. And they all give the same information. They give the same knowledge. That it doesn't change. Whereas conceptions of material things are constantly changing as to what is their identity and what is the substance behind that. But if you take out the idea that there is anything beyond what you can see with your senses, then you're in big trouble, because it's just like the idea that, well, nobody's seen God. Well, how do you know nobody's seen God? You ever asked everybody? You don't. You can come to the conclusion that there's nothing beyond sense perception, but actually, it doesn't take long to see that's a ridiculous conception, because I can say, oh, there's nothing there's nothing beyond what I can see and taste and touch and smell and hear. But there are dog whistles that you can blow that you can't hear, but every dog in the neighborhood starts barking as soon as you blow it. So it's a very foolish argument to just confine reality to what my senses tell me, because it doesn't really add up anyway. All the things I see and taste and touch and smell are, as Prabhupada says very nicely in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, when Arjuna actually surrenders to Krishna. He says, now I am confused about my duty, and I've lost all composure because of miserly weakness. In this condition, I am asking you to tell me for certain what is best for me. Now I am your disciple and a soul surrendered unto you. Please instruct me. And Prabhupada begins the purport with this. By nature's own way, the complete system of material activities is a source of perplexity for everyone. In every step there is perplexity, and therefore it behooves one to approach a bona fide spiritual master who can give one proper guidance for executing the purpose of life. Executing the purpose of life. The perplexity of the material world comes about. We become perplexed by the material world because on the basis of pursuing the gratification of our senses, we find no satisfaction. We find no satisfaction. There is no end to the endeavor to find satisfaction from contact of the senses with the objects of the senses. And there's a very beautiful verse in that regard in the 5th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says in verse number 22, Yehi samspasaja boga dukkha yonaya evate adyantavanta kuntaya nateshu ramate buddha. An intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery, which are due to contact with the material senses. O son of Kunti, such pleasures have a beginning and an end. And so the wise man does not delight in them. Does not delight in them. And the nature of all of this is the law of satiation, that you begin by getting some pleasure from something, but then the more you engage in it, the quotient of pleasure decreases, or the more you have to try to consume something to get the same level of pleasure that you always used to get before, but it doesn't work. And therefore, these things are described here as the dukkha yonaya, the sources of distress. The sources of distress. Those things which we think are actually the sources of happiness become the source of distress. And that perplexes us because we don't know why. We're perplexed, we're confused. So many words around that, bewildered. Because, now coming back to our little verse from today, because we don't understand, as it says here, that the material creations are only manifested for some time, and they are perverted shadows of the spiritual kingdom. Perverted shadows. Let's have a look at perverted. Perverted. Pervert. Just stay with pervert. Pervert, to turn someone aside from a right religious belief to a false or erroneous one, to distort natural order, to misdirect or misapply in the case of justice, law, and truth, to turn something or someone away from right opinion or conduct, to undo, to destroy something, to overthrow, to overturn. And here it comes from meaning away, and vertere, to turn, to turn, to be turned, or to convert, to transform, or to change in some way. So this word vert means to turn. So perversion is to turn something away from a natural order into something which is unnatural. The material world is an unnatural place for the soul. We are in an unnatural place. We're in the wrong place. And so therefore, so long as we are, as Prabhupada says, so long as we are, very beautiful phrases he uses in the 13th chapter, 22nd verse of Bhagavad Gita. He describes our entanglement in the material world by elaborating the definition of things from one sentence to the next. And he says, it is explained in the second chapter that the living entity is transmigrating from one body to another, just as one changes dress. This change of dress is due to his attachment to material existence. Now, just see how he elaborates on what material existence actually is. This change of dress is due to his attachment to material existence. And as long as he is captivated by this false manifestation, he has to continue transmigrating from one body to another. So the change of dress, the change of bodies is due to attachment to material existence. And as long as one is captivated through this attachment to material existence, he is captivated by a false manifestation. False in the sense that it is perverted, it is counterfeit. It's not that the material world is not real. We shouldn't think of the word false in terms of a dichotomy with real. What the actual dichotomy with false in this regard is the material world is false because the genuine world is the spiritual world. Just like a counterfeit $5 note is false because there is a genuine $5 note. And unless you're trained to see the difference, then you'll be captivated by the false. You won't think, oh, this is not genuine. This is not the right thing. Unless you are trained. And the human form of life is the opportunity to become trained by these great professors, these great professors, the Narads, the Vyasas, the Valmikis, the Devalas, the Asitas, the Madhvas, Sri Chaitanya, Ramanuja, Vishnu Swami, Nimbaka, Sridhar, Vishwanatha, Baladev, Bhaktivinoda, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, Bhaktivedanta Swami, and many other learned and self-realized souls who have the ability, who have the knowledge, and they have the ability to present this information to anyone who is interested to learn it. Anyone. And there are no material prerequisites other than your sincere desire and eagerness, as we see in the other part of this verse here. Please, therefore, speak to us who are eager to hear. And the word shraddhadananam, ready to receive with respect. That's all that's needed. That's all that's needed. There's one lecture Prabhupada gave on a verse from Chaitanya Charitamrita, where the verse was, Lord Chaitanya would sit at night in his room in Jagannath Puri, sit on the floor, and Ramananda Roy and Swarup Damodar would quote verses from the Srimad Bhagavatam to enhance Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's feelings of separation from Krishna in the mood of Srimati Radharani. And it is explained there, and Lord Chaitanya would sit and cry on the hearing of these recitations. So Srila Prabhupada begins the lecture by saying, so this is our process. You come, you sit on the floor, you hear about Krishna. My internet connection is unstable. Did you catch what I was saying there? Yes? Prabhupada said, you come, you sit on the floor, you hear about Krishna, and you cry.
Yes, Prabhu, we could hear you.
You could, thank you. And the reason why that happens, the reason why there is a resonance with anyone who is genuinely seeking to understand the absolute truth. When you come to hear about Krishna, there is a natural resonance within your heart because this is the supreme absolute truth. The causeless cause of all causes is Sri Krishna. Sri Krishna exists. And not only does he exist, but we all have actually a very intimate, personal, loving, eternal, individual relationship with him, which currently we are forgetful of because our consciousness has been perverted. We have turned our consciousness away from the real thing and got in at the genuine thing and got involved in the perverted shadow of that. However, as I've said many times, I quote this verse many times. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sajya Kabul Noi Shravanadi Sudha Chitta Karaye Odoi. Beautiful verse in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Chaitanya Charitamrita is written in very, very beautiful Bengali language, but there's a lot of quotes in Sanskrit from the Shastra. This verse is a very interesting verse in that it's half Sanskrit and half Bengali. The first half of the first couplet, the first line of the first couplet is Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema. That's pure Sanskrit. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema. Sajya Kabu Noi is Bengali. Shravanadi Sudha Chitta is Sanskrit. Karaye Udoy is Bengali. So what this verse is saying, ever fresh, ever fresh. Doesn't matter how many times you repeat what this verse is saying, it's ever fresh and it's ever enlivening. Nitya Siddha means eternally established. Krishna Prema means love of Krishna. We exist eternally to love Krishna, to be in love with Krishna. Sajya Kabul Noi, Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema, Sajya Kabul Noi means this is not something that has to be acquired from somewhere and inserted into you. It's not like, batteries not included. It's not like that. It's there. It's there. You don't have to go and get it from somewhere else. Shravanadi Sudha Chitta, Shravanadi, by this process of hearing about Krishna, simply hearing about Krishna, Sajya Kabul Noi, Sajya Kabul Noi. It becomes manifest. It becomes reawakened. In the beginning, all of this might seem incomprehensible and inconceivable. But then again, the challenge that is there is that actually everything is inconceivable to start with, because you haven't got a conception of it. You have to get a conception of something. You know, somebody says 2 and 2 equals 4. You've never heard that before. What do you mean? What does this mean? You have no conception of it. But by becoming familiar with something, then things begin to come into focus. And in the instances of, in what we're talking about here now, is this hearing the actual truth, if you really want to know. So therefore, you're submissive in your reception. You're not arguing the point. You might have doubts and need for clarification, but you're not challenging. You're absorbing. What actually happens is, as I said a few minutes ago, there's a resonance within your heart. Resonance means, like with a sitar, you have the string that you play, and when you hit certain notes on that string, there are what are called resonant, sympathetic strings, that by the vibration of this string, this one starts to vibrate. It resonates. So by exposing yourself to these sound vibrations, then something within your heart begins to resonate. And that's undeniable. That's an undeniable experience. That's what keeps us coming back, because it's a taste which is incomparable. There's no comparison. There's nothing within your experience to date which in any way compares with this. And the more you get it, the more all of the material tastes fade away. There's no need for them anymore, because that for which we are always anxious is being supplied to us. And that anxiety has been with us since the moment we turned away from Krishna and entered this material world. Because we are meant to be in love with Krishna. We are meant to be eternally in loving relationship with Krishna. So there has to be an eagerness, there has to be a respect, and there has to be somebody who knows what they're talking about. And then it's a very, very powerful process. And it works. It has effect very quickly. Very quick. Actually, the connection with Krishna, the reconnection with Krishna, is instantaneous if you want it to be. Like Srila Prabhupada always used to promote. Chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, and your life will become sublime. All you have to do is want it. Ask for it. And Krishna is very, very, Prabhupada says so many times, Krishna is very much anxious for us to come back to him. Very much anxious. In the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, when Gop Kumar arrives back in Goloka Vrindavan and is finally reunited with Krishna, Krishna says to him, you don't know how many times I've looked down that path and wondered when you will come. There's a path. There's an entrance into everything. There's a path, an entrance path into Braja. And Krishna is every day looking down that path, wondering when you will come. When will you come back? That's all he wants. He just wants us to come back to him. He's not angry. He's not vindictive. He's not any of these things. He's missing us and he wants us back. And he's given this very simple process handed down by these great professors simply by hearing about Krishna and becoming fixed in that process. Then it's very, very beautiful thing happens. Again, going back to that verse in the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, verse 22, at the end actually, I'll read that whole purport as an end to this today. The verse is Purusha prakritisto hi bhunkte prakritijan gunan karanam guna sangasya sada sadyoni janmasu. The living entity in material nature thus follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of nature. This is due to his association with that material nature. Thus, he meets with good and evil among various species. This verse is very important for an understanding of how the living entities transmigrate from one body to another. It is explained in the second chapter that the living entity is transmigrating from one body to another just as one changes dress. This change of dress is due to his attachment to material existence. As long as he is captivated by this false manifestation, he has to continue transmigrating from one body to another. Due to his desire to lord it over material nature, he is put into such undesirable circumstances. Just need a drink. Under the influence of material desire, the entity is born sometimes as a demigod, sometimes as a man, sometimes as a beast, as a bird, as a worm, as an aquatic, as a saintly man, as a bug. This is going on. And in all cases, the living entity thinks himself to be the master of his circumstances, yet he is under the influence of material nature. How he is put into such different bodies is explained here. It is due to association with the different modes of nature. One has to rise, therefore, above the three material modes and become situated in the transcendental position. That is called Krishna consciousness. Unless one is situated in Krishna consciousness, his material consciousness will oblige him to transfer from one body to another because he has material desires since time immemorial. But he has to change that conception. And now the next verse is probably one of the most important verses in all of Prabhupada's sentence, the most important sentence in all of Prabhupada's works. That change can be effected only by hearing from authoritative sources. That change can be effected only by hearing from authoritative sources. The best example is here. Arjuna is hearing the science of God from Krishna. Now, this is another very powerful sentence. The living entity, if he submits to this hearing process, will lose his long-cherished desire to dominate material nature. And gradually and proportionately, as he reduces his long desire to dominate, he comes to enjoy spiritual happiness. Now, this last sentence is the kicker. In a Vedic mantra, it is said that as he becomes learned in the association of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he proportionately relishes his eternal blissful life. Om Tat Sat. Does anyone have any questions or reflections, comments they want to make today?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, this is Mrigant.
But Krishna, you're reversing in age. I mean, what's happened? 10 minutes ago, you were a grumpy old man, and now you're smiling young youth. What's happened here?
Showing you the reverse order.
Nice to see you, Mrigan.
Nice to see you too, Prabhu. Thank you for the wonderful class.
Oh,
I
well,
had a question regarding you mentioned how we have to want it. We have to want to be Krishna conscious and with Krishna for the effects to take place. But I think sometimes devotees may ask questions, you know, the Nectar of Devotion saying, or the Bhagavatam saying, even if you just chant the holy name in jest, just to make fun of something, or even for musical effect, because it's namapas, it's going to remove all the sinful activities and so on. Why doesn't that take place? Well, I can understand that you may not be with Krishna because you may not be able to call out, even if you think you want to. You may not be calling out with purity. But what about the other namapasa effects? Why do we see that people who chant Krishna's name, sometimes even for musical purposes or jokingly, they don't have their karma or past impressions removed?
it's a gradual process, a gradual and proportionate process. And it really starts, there is all kinds of definitions of what are called agyata sukritis, unknown, unremembered activities of devotional service. Just like at the end of the 6th chapter, Arjuna says, well, you know, what happens to the yogi who's not successful? And then Krishna outlines what happens. And you go on a journey. You go to the heavenly planets, and all these things happen, and you enjoy materially. And then you come back into the human form of life on this planet, and somehow or another, even without not seeking them, you become attracted to the principles of yoga. That is because of agyata sukriti. But there has to come a time when you seriously and consciously take to the process of bhakti yoga, and you don't interrupt it. Savaipung samparodamo yato bhakti irdhoksache ahoitaki apratihata yayatma suprasidati. The process must, the engagement must eventually and finally and irrevocably become unmotivated and uninterrupted. So there may be mixed motivations, and there may be therefore interruptions, distractions, and those distractions may take many millions of years to deal with. But then eventually you'll come back, and you'll be back in the process until eventually you become fixed and determined to never do anything else. So there's a lot, as Prabhupada used to say, there's many a slip twixt the cup and the lip. And we live in a material world wherein the influence of Maya, the presence of Maya, and the pitiless intrigues of Maya are relentless. Relentless. I think I talked about this. I mean, I don't know if they've got it here, but I remember in England they used to see people drinking an energy drink called Relentless. Relent. To relent means to ease up, ease off, back off. Relentless means no cessation, just constant pressure. The presence of Maya is everywhere. We're in Durga Devidam. We're in Durga's realm. Everywhere you go. Abrahma Bhuvana Loka Puna Avito. Puna Avatino Juna. Everywhere. Maya is everywhere. And this repetition of birth and death is everywhere. This whole place is antithetical and antagonistic to the performance of devotional service in any way, shape, or form. But the potency of devotional service is inconceivable. And neha bikrama nashosti pratyavayo na vidyate. There's no loss or diminution, whether it is knowingly done or unknowingly done. But eventually, we must come to the point of deliberate spiritual intelligence. We apply deliberate in spiritual intelligence and we become devotees. What does devotee mean? We throw this word around, but what does it mean? Let's have a look at that. Let's do a quick. Where are we? Go and have a look at devotee. Actually, we say devotee because Prabhupada pronounced it that way with his Bengali accent, but actually English people call it devotee. From devote, one who is self-dedicated to a cause or practice. From devote, let's look at that, go back to the root. Appropriate by, or as if by vow. From down or away, volvere, to vow, right? So to apply zealously and exclusively, yes? To addict oneself to something. So we have to come to a point where our vow is unshakable and unbroken, that I am simply going to engage in devotional service and nothing else. Along the way, all kinds of things happen. Like, we all heard, that's why Prabhupada said, you go out and chant Hare Krishna in the street. It's having an effect. But no matter what the effect may be, ultimately, like Krishna says to Arjuna at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, so you've heard everything now, you consider these things and you do whatever you like. That you can do whatever you like is always there because we are living entities who have the capacity to desire by our free will. And our involvement in devotional service has to be our desire, which by our own free will we are pursuing, and we become deliberate and determined in that, and nothing shifts us. That may take many millions of lifetimes. Prabhupada was once asked, he's asked many times, how long does it take to become Krishna conscious? And one time he said, you can become Krishna conscious in a moment. But that moment may take many thousands of lifetimes to reach. It's really a question of what you want and being clear on what you want and very clear on what you don't want. And that may take a bit of time to sort out because there's such a thing as momentum. And as Prabhupada says it, we've been in the material world pursuing material desires since time immemorial. There's a momentum to that. And so there's a process called anartha-nivritti. A part of the development of devotional service is becoming free from unwanted, inauspicious desires and habits and attachments. Confirmed. Manohar just sneezed. Confirmed.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Thank you for that answer.
Okay. The real thing is about intention. What is your intention? What is it that you want? Where are you going? Where do you want to go? And how determined are you to get there? That's why there must be the constant association of devotees. like Prabhupada used to say, if you continually go to the bar, you'll eventually start drinking. So don't go there. But what do you go there? What do you go there for in the first place? Association. So birds of a feather flock together. That's why the association with devotees is so important, and so because it's very powerful. It's very powerful. Because we're living in a world where there's, in one sense, the only evidence of any of this is the devotees and what the devotees do and say. Anything else? No? Okay, well, thank you so much, everybody. Another almost hour and a half of your time you've put into this. It's very enlivening, very encouraging to see. And I thank you all for your perseverance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you very
Prabhu.
much.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, may the Lord bless you all and keep you from all harm, and that we may all meet together, same place, same time next week.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Hare
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 Krishna.
Krishna.
Krishna.